Good morning, everybody. This is Denise Ackelson from OSPI, and we are about to launch on our next to the last webinar in this yearly series. And I want to apologize for being late on getting out the description. We had some logistical things here at OSPI, so we're sorry about that. But we're so excited to present today about summer melt prevention and transition support. The last webinar will be May 24th, and that will be about financial planning, the GET program, and 529 plan. So we're hoping that many of the elementary counselors will be interested in learning more about that so they can share with their families. So today, for our summer melt prevention and transition support webinar, we have Beth Kelly and Yokiko Hayashi Seagal from the Washington Student Achievement Council. So here is Yokiko.
Thank you, Denise, for the wonderful introduction. Again, my name is Yokiko Hayashi Seagal. I am the College Bound Program Associate, and I do outreach and communication. And with me, I have Beth Kelly.
Hi, I'm Beth Kelly. I also work at the Washington Student Achievement Council. I'm an Assistant Director of College Access and Support, and I primarily do professional development and resource development, and I'm going to share some resources with you today. So, in addition to resources, our agenda is going to cover what exactly is summer melt, and we're going to explore reasons why students melt, and then we will look at how prevalent summer melt is, and then we're going to share with you some strategies on how to determine if melt is happening at your school or district. And then finally, we'll conclude with some strategies and resources to address melt and also transition into the first year of college or post-secondary plans.
So to kind of get to the basics, well, what is summer melt? And summer melt refers to the phenomenon when seemingly college-interested students fail to enroll in the fall after their high school graduation. So we have these students who have completed the college-going steps, they've applied, been accepted, but for some reason something happens and they don't make it to that next step. So we want them to kind of persist beyond that, but sometimes these things happen and they don't get there.
So why exactly do students melt? So between senior signing day, or college signing day as you might call it, and the fall, a number of tasks have to be completed throughout the summer before students actually attend. And for first generation students, these tasks can be really overwhelming because they don't have access typically to a school counselor, and they're unsure of how to navigate the system. And often their families are as well. So students are often required to do a variety of tasks such as register and attend orientation and take placement tests. And often those two tasks are students underestimate the importance of those. So we want to strongly encourage students to attend orientation, and when they're taking placement tests, we want them to prepare, and if they don't score well, we want them to retest. And students need to know that waivers are available sometimes to offset those fees. But the importance of placement tests shouldn't be underestimated, because students who are placed into a developmental or remedial course often will not persist that first year of college. Other tasks include determining cost of attendance, trying to figure out those financial aid award letters, understanding bills and what to do if they get a bill that they can't pay, registering for class, getting immunizations, completing housing forms, arranging transportation. There's a myriad tasks associated with preparing to enroll in the fall. And one of the other areas is access to school institutions' online portals. So for students who don't have regular internet access, those online portals that institutions have that they want students to communicate through, some of those students aren't going to get those messages on time if they're not able to access the internet on a regular basis. So those tasks often prevent students from starting in the fall.
So nationally, about 20 to 40% of students melt. And these rates are higher among special populations. So we have students who are low or moderate income, and then students with lower academic achievement, and those who tend to enroll at the community colleges compared to their peers who enroll at the four-year universities. So as the student level pattern suggests, schools with greater proportions of students qualifying for free or reduced price lunch tend to have higher rates of summer melt. And why does this matter? Well, in the US, having an education matters, and on average, bachelor's degree holders earn nearly twice as much as their high school graduate peers and double the wages of workers without high school degrees. So further education has a host of other non-monetary benefits for students. About 68% of all jobs in Washington require post-secondary credentials, yet our highest poverty communities lack an educated workforce and need to compete in today's global economy. As evidenced by low graduation rates and even lower post-secondary enrollment and completion rates. As a result, the state is the highest importer of human resources in the country. In 2014, the state legislature adopted statewide goals for educational attainment, and based on the Washington Student Achievement Council's goals, which are the roadmap, the goals state that by 2023, one, that all adults ages between 25 to 44 will have a high school diploma or equivalent. Two, that at least 70% of all adults aged between 25 to 44 have some post-secondary credential.
Now we are going to look at how to determine if summer melt is occurring among your students. And I should say this formula is developed by Ben Castleman at Harvard. And we have a link to his summer melt handbook at the end of the presentation. And we will be sending out the PowerPoint so you'll have access to all these links that we're going to explore. But Ben Castleman's sort of the genius behind all this summer melt work. So if you want to look more at the formula that I'm going to explain, that's where you would want to investigate. So the basic formula that Ben Castleman lays out is you want to determine which of your graduating students intend to go to college in the fall after high school. And one of the primary ways that you can do that is through senior exit surveys. And this is really a best practice for documenting the students' intentions for the fall, especially their college intentions. One of the best practices is to administer the survey at the last month of school so that you get the most accurate information. And we suggest that you include it in the graduation materials that you're giving to students and their families because it's more likely that they'll actually fill it out. You want to make sure that you are asking specifically which institution the student plans to go to. And I would recommend that you ask if the student has paid their deposit or requested a waiver, because paying that deposit is a super strong signal that the student is actually going to attend in the fall. And if they say no, I would have a second question to ask whether they plan to attend in the fall. You also want to make sure that you ask for students' contact information if you plan to reach out and follow up with them. Just a little side note here, electronic surveys can be really useful because you get that information more quickly and you can respond even quicker than having to sort through all the paper copies. You also might be able to work with an institution to get an aggregate report on the total number of your students from that school who have paid a deposit. And I would just look at what school the majority of your kids are going to and work with them. That might be possible. It may not, but it's worth a try. The second step is to determine how many of your students actually enroll in the fall after graduation. So if possible, you want to get data from the National Student Clearinghouse. I'm not sure how many of you have access to that, but if you do, you can obtain individual post-secondary records, and you can find post-secondary level enrollment records from the Clearinghouse. You should find out if your district receives Clearinghouse student tracker reports for individual high schools. The National Student Clearinghouse is an incredible resource. If you don't have it, I would suggest looking into it. I believe the cost is $425 a year for small schools and $2,500 for large schools. If not, then you can work with local institutions. If the clearinghouse data is not available, you might be able to reach out to local colleges and universities that historically have enrolled large groups of your students. And you can use this data to find out if part of your population is actually melting. So by collecting the enrollment numbers, you can estimate the college-specific summer melt that's occurring among your students. You might also be able to use some of OSPI data analytics, and I believe all that data comes from the ERDC. That might be helpful. It might not be as timely as the clearinghouse. I think the clearinghouse might have more current numbers, but I think you will get definitely a historic pattern that will be established. So the final step is to use this formula, and this formula will tell you the percentage of students that are melting. So you want to take the information that you got in steps 1 and 2, and this will determine the rate of students that have melted. And then when you understand better what your school is facing, then you want to establish some strategies to address melt. And so we are going to shift gears a little bit, but I just want to remind you, if you want to learn more about this formula and tracking and how to do all of that, check out Ben Castleman's work, and we'll show you that at the end.
So when you're strategizing, you think about, well, how can we at our school address summer melt? To determine the right intervention, you want to consider a few different things. So you want to think about the availability of resources that you have, the quality of information that you have and access to, and the strength of your connections with area colleges, universities, and college access organizations. So not every circumstance is going to be the same, but really what we want to emphasize is that having the ability to partner and to utilize resources from a collective group can really provide you with the ability to start addressing summer melt and giving you some ideas and key strategies that can help you reach these students.
So if you really have no resources, one of the things you can do is distribute a summary of key tasks that students have to do throughout the summer. And you could include that in graduation materials or distribute it during senior signing day or college signing day. If you don't have a list already, we have a list for you that you can customize. And this handout that's shown below, we share with our Gear Up schools. It's totally customizable. The tasks are really common for 2- and 4-year institutions, and it also includes some tasks that special populations should be addressing as well. If a large percentage of your students are going to a particular school, you might actually reach out to that school and see if you can get some institution-specific things to add, or maybe the institution has a list of their own to share. But this list is definitely a good template that you can use with your students, and it's not Gear Up specific. If you do have resources, aka money, you should think about, can you hire community mentors, counselors, college access professionals, other staff throughout the summer to do outreach to students? Ben Castleman's main outreach intervention, I guess, is text messaging. And the text messaging is really to send reminders to students about tasks. And you could also do a combination. You could go old school and provide paper copies, or you could do one-way or two-way text messaging if you have the means. Another resource that we have, and again, this is customizable and not Gear Up specific, excuse me, is a student tracker. And this tracker in particular really goes through the senior year. So it has information around college application, financial aid on it, but it also has at the end information around the acceptance process and deposits and things like that, and can help you track which of your students are on track to start school in the fall. So that might be of use to you, and you can take a look at that at your own time.
So, as a reminder, when you have these students, once they're graduating from high school, there's a lot of different things that they're required to do before they start attending their post-secondary institutions after they graduate. So these things can include attending an orientation, doing financial aid and other paperwork, paying for tuition, going over their room and board, their student fees, which can also include their health insurance, sometimes taking placement exams and selecting the right classes and going through registration. So we realize that there's a lot of these different pieces that fall into play, which can start to create barriers for students because they might not understand what each of these pieces mean together, and that if they don't do one, sometimes it can impact the other. So providing students with a modest amount of assistance can really make these tasks a lot easier to tackle, and can really allow these students to get to their post-secondary institutions. So we really strongly encouraging these students to attend their orientation. This is a fantastic resource for them. They can meet and connect with other students, with current students, meet with resources on their campuses. If your school has Gear Up or other college access, find out if you can use funds to pay for transportation for students to get to these types of events. Orientation costs can be charged to the student's account. So once their financial aid comes in, it could help kind of pay for these fees as well. So you have to make sure to have them check in with their financial aid office and their institutions of where they're attending to see what their options are. Be sure that students know that they can ask for waivers for financial hardships. This is something that I always encourage students. You don't know unless you ask, and if you don't ask, it's always a no. So if they can't afford a placement test, or if they get a bill, make sure that you encourage them to become self-advocates, because you want to provide them with the tools to be able to do these things without you, but it's also good that they have your guidance while they have you. Because sometimes these fees can be waived, reduced, or even postponed. So that way it gives them the option to start the ball rolling and get there, and then their financial aid can help them pay for these fees. You also want to remind them that it's important to have placement tests and to take them. Students often underestimate how important they are and then get placed into remedial or developmental education, and we don't want to have them do that, especially if it's not necessary. So students are at a high risk of dropping out if they're placed in the wrong courses, and so students should be reminded that they have to study for them and be prepared. If they don't do well, encourage them to study and retest, and then there's a lot of online resources that can help them. A fantastic couple of resources are the Khan Academy and the College Board AccuPlacer online prep. So when we're talking about effective practices, something we want to kind of keep in mind is to set realistic expectations, make sure that they're accurate and timely information is shared with the students and their families about what we expect them to know, what their attitude should be, and what their behavior should look like so they can be successful. A lot of students, especially in special population, like first-generation students, experience self-doubt and the imposter syndrome. So we want to explain what common challenges they may face, make sure that we're demystifying them and sharing how students can find supports on their campuses, because it's really important to making them feel connected.
And we do have some resources listed below, but we are going to dive into them just a little bit later. So, but we will address the setting realistic expectations.
So some more effective practices were supporting for transition. So strongly encourage your students to participate in summer bridge programs and first year experiences. That's something that I did as a college student, and it hands down was the most beneficial thing that I ever could have participated in. It made me feel connected to my college campus. I built some of my strongest friendships and relationships from doing a summer bridge. So that's something I'm incredibly passionate about. I encourage as many students who are eligible to participate.
Yeah, it's been proven. It's What Works Clearinghouse, best practice. Those two interventions are very valuable.
Right. And with TRIO Student Support Services, it's also a great support program that provides students with a lot of support, and that can be so fundamental to their success when they're on that college campus. And Camp, Passport to College programs, and others can be particularly beneficial for our migrant students and foster alumni, respectively. So it's a really good opportunity for students to feel that connection and sort of allow themselves to let go of where they were in high school to build something new and start something in a positive direction. So you really want to make sure that you can help find these connections for these students, because the more that they see there are students who are like them thriving on campuses, the more likely they're going to go and participate. Those on-campus support services are amazing. You want to encourage them to participate. So again, talking about that self-advocacy piece.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. That's key.
Right, so having students learn how to access tutoring and academic support services. Tutoring is definitely something that I took advantage of when I was on my college campus, and talking about writing, especially if students sort of lack some of that confidence, it's really important to encourage that as well.
I think that it's also important to normalize those services, that doesn't mean that you don't belong there, that you're going to experience challenges, but everyone's experiencing challenges, and there are supports there. Plus, you paid for those supports.
Right.
So take advantage of them.
Exactly. And like for our students who might want to take advantage of the access services, so if you need some accommodations in order to thrive and be successful, we want to encourage them to do that and to know that they are there to help them. TRIO programs, not every student is understands that they could be eligible for TRIO, and it's a fantastic opportunity for them to build connections. And then learn about mental health counseling services. Often a lot of campuses offer free services for students. Up to where I used to work, there were 6 visits that students did not have to pay for, and they were able to get the support they needed. Also learn about things that you might have on their campus, like a food pantry, a clothing bank, or other support that's just important to their own personal health that keeps them going.
And this resource that's listed below, it might be really useful. We have an activity, a sort of lesson plan, if you will, that you could do with your students on identifying resources and support services. If you don't have time to do it because it's towards the end of the year, you could still provide the students with those handouts. The handout, resources and support services to navigate your way, is an online sort of scavenger hunt where students will use their institution's website to identify and locate contact information, where they can find information about various supports. And then the second handout is resource scenarios. And those scenarios are really common things that happen to students during the first year of school. So then they use the information from the previous document, and they kind of make a plan on what they're going to do if, you know, they're not doing well in a class, if they get sick. And so it has all of these scenarios really to normalize, like, this is going to happen to you. Think about it ahead of time. You won't feel so overwhelmed if you've thought about it. So that activity is pretty fun. You can do it like in an advisory class. You could do it as part of your senior signing day, and we'll talk more about the activities. But if you don't have time to do activities, you could still check out the handouts.
And one more thing before we move on to our next part with the resources is also encouraging these students, if they can, to participate in the first year experience programs.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is something that provides these students with fundamental essentially best practices that can support them when they are going into that next step. So it helps them with professional development, but then also allows them to understand that they can earn some additional credits, which is great. And normally, like when I used to work at Evergreen, those additional 2 credits did not cost anything else because they were already enrolled full time. So it also allows them to understand what resources are specific to their institution. So if they didn't see that in their orientation, they can make those sort of connections with other students who are first year students. And this is a really great intervention for students who've been classified as moderate to high risk of dropping out of school, which allows them to kind of feel more connected and sort of intervenes and prevents them from falling behind.
And I think if you don't qualify for TRIO, you know, first year experience is open usually to all students,
yeah.
And it's pretty common for an institution to have some sort of first year type of programming. So yeah, definitely encourage your students to check that out. Oh, now here's the big resource that I was talking about. So Washington State Gear Up, in collaboration with the College Bound Scholarship and the 12th Year Campaign, developed this activity guide. And so it's about preparing students for the transition to college, so over the summer and the fall. So this guide is broken up into a variety of activities that have corresponding handouts. So I'll just run through the 4 suggested activities, and all these activities can be customized. It's not prescriptive. You can do whatever you want. You can change the handouts, do what works for your school and your students. So, and the idea was to do these activities around senior signing day, but you should do whatever works for you. So the first one is on student alumni panels. That's pretty much what you think it is. It's your student alumni. And we have a list of common student questions from our Gear Up kids. But it's also important to get your own kids to think about what questions they have for the alumni. We also suggest that adults aren't necessarily present during that panel, or at least for not all of it, so that the panels can offer some candid response Q&A. So I know that's scary to relinquish that control, but that is a suggestion. Take it if you want. And another activity is post-secondary pathway cohorts. This kind of depends on how big your school is, but the idea is to take your senior class and divide them up into their different pathways. This can include military and other pathways like workforce. And you can group students by the institution they plan to go to. And so if it's a large school and they don't know each other necessarily, they might want to share contact information. You might want to do an icebreaker activity. Another thing to do is to develop or to use a growth mindset activity in that breakout, and then hand out that task list that we referenced before. The post-secondary cohorts, you know, the reason why that's an activity is we really want them to like go to campus and feel like they have some support on campus, they know someone. And so in that post-secondary pathway cohort, you could do the other activities so that they are doing those activities as a team, especially the resource activity. But that's just an idea. So the third activity is the one I talked about. And then the fourth one focuses on the differences between high school and college. And it's just really to, again, set those realistic expectations so that they aren't overwhelmed when the courses and the way professors interact with students and attendance and all of those things. So they're not surprised, taken off guard. They have a mindset that it's going to be more rigorous and different, and they know what supports they can take advantage of to address their challenges. So, and then, yeah. Wait, look at that. Oh, I'm sorry. On this last, they can't see me. You can't see me pointing. I'm sorry. There is this handout listed at the end that's information for first-year students, and that establishes the kind of phases that a student would go through, like the honeymoon phase, like, oh no, disenchanted phase, and like the norming, that sort of thing. And it talks about what is really common to expect. Like at this point, you might get homesick. That's normal. This is what you do. So that handout can be useful. It's just like setting the mindset, so they're kind of prepared. And this resource here that we have is a family guide, and you can download this and print it. It is 6 pages, and it walks families through how to support their child. So when their child goes to college, their role is going to change, and they're going to be more of a coach. And so this tells parents or families sort of what to expect, like the phases and the challenges and things that students experience in their first year. And it offers them conversation starters. And we could take a look at it if we have time. But It offers them questions that they can ask. It offers suggestions on if your student is experiencing this. You could ask, like, have you looked into tutoring, or have you signed up for your classes for next year? Have you completed the FAFSA or WASFA? So it helps parents and families who may not know how to navigate the system continue to support their child and encourage them, and not tell them, oh, you should come home because you have a problem. It kind of sets that problem-solving mindset.
So just some additional resources that you have at your disposal, and when we send out this presentation, you should be able to use these links. But the first one is the SDP Summer Melt Handbook. So the guide designed by Ben Castleman, sort of the guru, as Beth already mentioned. And it's saying a guide investigating and responding to summer melt, so giving you some key strategies there. Foster care transition toolkit. So this is definitely something when we're talking about our special populations, providing students who are foster youth some additional support is really fundamental to their success. So talking about how you can cater your support specifically for these students. And then preparing students with disabilities for post-secondary education, so how students who have access or need access support when they're on college campuses, and help transition that.
I just want to add that it does say Gear Up School Staff, and it was designed by Gear Up, but it's completely applicable to non-Gear Up staff. And most of the post-secondary institutions in Washington, their disability offices use this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then another one is supporting transgender students. So talking about how you can support your LGBTQ students through the college admission and financial aid processes, so that way they have a better understanding, and there's some more support systems that are there specifically for these students.
Yeah, this one also talks about what students might want to ask around housing and things like that.
Yeah, and I think also incorporating parts about using proper identifiers and pronouns, making sure that we're being inclusive with language.
Well, we also want to make sure that we're connecting these populations with different groups on campus where they can find support as well.
And then there's transitionyear.org, which has student and family guides available, which, and as it says, emphasizes on supporting students with mental illness in their transition to college. So those mental health services are really fundamental. We want to make sure that they're highlighted as well. And then the college access for students experiencing homelessness, so having students be able to kind of see that there are other services available as well for them, the special population.
Yeah, and those task lists, you want to make sure that they're inclusive, and thinking about making sure students have a plan about year-round housing if that's needed, and things like that. So I think we have time that we could actually take a quick peek at the activity guide that I was talking to you about. So let me just open this up if I can figure out this laptop. It's always like tricky when you have to switch to something on the internet. So this is our Gear Up website. So our Gear Up website, maybe I'll just do that real quick first. So I work with Washington State Gear Up, and like I said, I do resource development for them. And when we create resources, we try to create them for a much broader audience to support all college-bound students and college access professionals and school counselors. And we have a section on gearup.wa.gov. If you go to resources, you'll see we have a series of family newsletters. There's one for every month for 7th through 12th grade. And they're templates. You can customize them completely. And they have college knowledge and financial aid information.
We've also connected those at OSPI on the Career Guidance Washington site. Like Beth said, they're not just for Gear Up.
No, and you can customize them completely how you will. We also have a college-going culture section. And this section might have some stuff that you want to use for a senior signing day or college signing day. So we have college spotlight flyers. These are like infographics for every institution in Washington that our communications person made. We have like ABC college posters to put around your room. But this is something that our communications person just updated, and we're all very excited. This is great for senior signing day. We have different pennants. She made these for us. So we have them even for other opportunities, so you're not leaving out people. And she will make them for an institution. If it's not listed, she'll make one, so that you're being sure to include all your students. Mm-hmm. So they're downloadable, and you just print them and cut them out. And we think that will be helpful in senior signing day. And we also have a variety of other images and things like that. We have a really, I think, helpful scholarship page. We have a weekly bulletin, so we list scholarships on a regular basis, but we maintain this year-round, this large listing of scholarships, and most are annual. So if your students missed, well, it will at least give you an idea of what to expect for next year if you want to start sending out scholarship listings. And then here's our big Washington State created resources. And we update these every summer. So we have a campus visit guide on how to plan, and we have campus visit information for all of the institutions for group visits. Here are those guides that we mentioned earlier about supporting students with disabilities and transgender students, and we have a senior binder system for students. We looked at that. Here's our family. We have a series of games that you can do at family nights. And then here's the transition section. So, I'm sorry, and we do have a financial aid 101 book in the financial section. So this activity guide, preparing students for the transition to college. And is it just me, or does everyone hate when it opens in that view?
I also do not like it.
So we'll see. I'll go to the handouts. Sorry, this is taking so long. The student questions. Students have some interesting questions. I think I weeded out some of the stuff that should be censored. We have some. So this is the handout, that's the checklist. And again, you can update this, but it basically covers what students should expect to deal with over the summer, and what they should think about. I know it's long, but there's a lot of things that they have to do. This is the resource handout. It gives some examples of some common resources. And this is the online scavenger hunt, where they would go through their website. It also helps them navigate their school's website, because every institution's website is different. And some are really user-friendly and some are not. And here are the resource scenarios. So you feel, it covers like depression, not succeeding in academically, feeling out of place. You used to be like #1 in your school. Now you're in a class with everyone who is like the best at something. And I mean, so it covers everything. So not everything, but it's a good exercise. And then there's a series of differences between high school and college. And I would also like to show you the parent document that I was talking about, because that is something that everyone can use as well. So we printed this for our Gear Up schools, and we are handing this out during college signing day. So this guide, the reason we created this guide was we really wanted them to be able to coach their student and make sure when their student is feeling out of place and really wanting to come home that they're encouraging them to problem solve. And so this is real quickly. So it has tips for success. It has a first year in 5 stages. So this is what I was talking about. You know, it often students are super excited usually, and then it goes straight into culture shock. So then there's a period of initial adjustment and loss of confidence, and then acceptance. So it has, for each of those phases, it has advice for family. It explains FERPA, and then conversation starters. So, like, this is what your student may be dealing with. Like, they might be having to share a room with a stranger that they're not getting along with. They might have a difficult time managing the commute from home to school if they're a commuter. So we try to make this inclusive and not just 4-year residential thing, but, you know, all students. So it has all these conversation starters and advice for families. And we're hoping that it will help families feel more empowered. So those are just a couple of our Gear Up resources. I'm sorry I didn't mean to talk about them so long, but they are really meant to support like an ideal college-bound student and their family.
So that's great. No, this is amazing. And I think, I guess what this is meant to highlight is that Gear Up, Washington State Gear Up has a phenomenal set of resources that has done a fantastic job, especially with the communications person, developing these fantastic, usable and accessible pieces for you. And so that's sort of what we wanted to share. And they have things that range from supporting your students in their high school experience, college application experience, and then transition, summer melts, kind of the whole gamut. So this is something we're really excited that we're happy to have you here and share with us. And we would love to see if you guys have questions, we are open and available. Feel free to type them in the chat box. We'll give you guys a couple of minutes and feel free to ask us. Other than that, I think we're done and just happy to have you guys here with us this Wednesday.
So seeing that we don't have any questions that are coming up, feel free though to email Yokiko or Beth or me here at OSPI. And we really appreciate all these wonderful resources. I know I learned a lot today that I wasn't aware of. I thought I knew where your resources were, but I'm really glad you took the opportunity to point those out on your website, Beth, because they're fantastic.
Yeah, our website is really more of like a clearinghouse. So if you need anything related to college access and support, try the search bar.
Yeah. And of course, you can find this webinar on Ready, Set, Grad. A little bit later it will be posted, but we will also send it out to you so that you can have access to those live links, and I'll send it out this afternoon. So without further ado, thank you so much for attending, and we do have one more webinar in May that we will be sending out information about. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.